Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday. Today's going to be somewhat of a special Q&A Tuesday. You guys know how I feel about history, specifically history pertaining to watches, and nothing beats a real story. And when I say a real story, I mean story of a human being with a particular timepiece that ties back to the good old days or the good old times. So I received an email from a gentleman by the name of Danny. Hi Roman, my name is Danny. I do enjoy watching your YouTube channel. I was hoping you might answer a question. I'm 63 years young, like that. And I have a gold Rolex, which I got when my father died some 30 years ago. The story goes, my dad, after returning from World War II, went back to his town where his mother lived, Kirkland, Lake Ontario, to continue his job as a milkman. Back in those days, late 40s, in a very rural northern Ontario, milk was delivered by horse and milk wagon. Anyway, when Dad got back, he proceeded into a local jewelry store and said to the owner, I want to buy a watch that will last me the rest of my life. The owner sold him a gold Tudor Rolex Oyster Regent, for I am told was a very near or slightly more than $100, which my dad wore all of his remaining life. He never did buy another watch for more than 40 years. He wore that watch every single day. We're getting ready to move into a new home, and I came across the watch in a cedar chest I was packing. I cleaned it up, and my wife wondered if maybe I should get this appraised. So Roman, I remembered that I had subscribed to your channel, and thus you receiving this email. Could you give me a ballpark figure on what the watch is worth? I have a few pics if you'd like to see the watch. Thanks for your time, Roman, and continue the good work on YouTube. When I received this email, I immediately replied. And just as a side note, guys, I know a lot of you try to contact me certain ways. I get a lot of DMs on my Instagram. I get a lot of messages on Facebook, things on Twitter, whatever, all these wonderful things, or even LinkedIn. But I think the best way to contact me is the same way this gentleman did it. It's thefounderlb@gmail.com. That is really the best way to get a hold of me because it's very difficult for me to answer questions among 15 different platforms. So email that's tied to my YouTube account is the best way of getting a hold of me. Anyway, back to the story. So here's the watch that Danny sent me. And if you can put that up on the screen, that'd be great. My response to him, and I'm just reading our email chain, got it. So for the most part, these were gold-plated watches that trade anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500. So the watch that Danny has is actually not solid gold. He was under the impression it's not. It was a gold-plated watch. I know that the bracelet is definitely not gold. It's something that was added after the fact. It's not the original bracelet that came with the watch. Those pieces came on straps, and the steel pieces called on what's called that old rivet bracelet. This is what I explained to Danny. And then I asked him for a few pictures of his father. I knew that, iPhones weren't exactly a thing back then, so he had to take a picture of an actual picture, and you can actually see him wearing the watch in this particular picture. So the following email, what he wrote was, good evening, 2 pics of my dad, Green McDowell. He was 17 when he enlisted in the BC Dragons. He was put into a tank, he was a radio operator, and sighted 90mm howitzer cannons. The other part of the story you already know, returning after 2 tours in Europe, and then his visit to the Kirkland Lake jewelry store to buy his lifelong watch companion. And you're welcome to use these pictures if it helps your story. Obviously, I am using these pictures, Danny. They are very, very helpful to the story. And it brings to my next point is that the very first question was, what is the value of that watch? I know you're not someone that's going to go out there and sell this family heirloom for $1,500 to $2,000, whatever the value may be behind that watch. But the answer to your question, that watch is actually priceless. It just goes to show you don't necessarily have to have a heavy-duty gold watch. You don't necessarily have to have a super uber collectible that fetches $500,000 in auction. This isn't one of those pieces, but this watch is priceless. Had I been in your shoes and I had that type of history with a watch that may have belonged to my father, grandfather, or whomever in my family, to me that watch would be priceless, as it should be to you. People talk about collectability of watches or collectibles in general. To me, this is the ultimate collectible. I hope you cherish that watch forever, and I hope you pass it on to your family members so that 100 years from now, your descendants can talk about this watch that their great-great-grandfather at one time bought for $100 and wore it for the rest of his life every single day post what sounds to me like a hell of a military career. Dan, thank you so much for sharing this little piece of history with me. Thank you so much for sharing the watch. This is the kind of stuff that makes me tick, pun intended, I guess, is when you have that type of story behind the watch. I'm sure if that watch could tell a story, we could probably dedicate 10 other episodes on my YouTube channel to continue the story going. So again, thank you so much for reaching out. I hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of history of an individual. This is why I love YouTube. because it allows you to do things like this. It allows you to bring stories such as these to light. And I'm sure there's a million stories out there. You guys are welcome to share them with me. I'll be more than happy to share them on my channel with our tight little community here. So Danny, thanks again, and we'll talk soon. This is a really good one I'm going to finish with. Hi Roman, as usual, love the videos. Question, are you going to get your kids involved in the business? What's your take on having the children of the owner get involved early in life and eventually take over the company one day? You don't have to mention my name if you choose to answer this question. Just want to know your take on this subject. Thanks, Chris. The gentleman that asked, I don't mind mentioning your name, Christopher Anthony. I cannot pronounce your name, Kajuango. Sorry, that's as best as I'm going to do that. My thought of getting kids involved in the business is actually very positive. And it's not about getting them involved in the business, it's about getting them involved in working. My son has been to my office since he was 6 years old. I had him put catalog prices, realized prices in auction on certain watches on paper catalogs back in the day, from Christie's to Sotheby's to Antiquarium and all those other wonderful auction houses. I made him do work, I paid him for his work accordingly, and that was simply due to get them involved in not the business, but in the work environment, getting used to the fact that, hey, you got to get out there and work, right? Nothing comes free in this life. I wasn't raised with a silver spoon in my mouth. I can't say the same about my children. They are. They're getting everything and anything they want, but I'm lucky enough to have a spouse, and myself included, where we're on the same page, and we don't spoil our kids. My kids are not spoiled by far, and they know what it's like to work. As far as eventually taking the company over one day, that is not a task I will ever put in front of any of my kids, and I have 3. If one day they choose to go the route, to go into the same business at me, and they take interest in my business and potentially decide that this is something they want to do, I will give them an opportunity to do so. But this is not a burden or a task or the pressure I will put on my children, say, oh, well, you know what, here's your dad, I made this successful business, and one day you're going to take over and rule the world. No, absolutely not. The only pressure I put on my children, or the only task I set forth in front of them, is to get an education, to get a good education, to take everything out of an education. It's not about going to college, that, oh, you must go to college and get a good education. It's about going to college and getting everything out of that college they possibly can to help them with their future, whatever it is that they decide to do. Any one of my children decides to go out there tomorrow and become a doctor or a lawyer, which is a far cry from being a watch dealer or running an online company, then by all means that's what they're going to do. But I would never put the pressure on them to saying, oh, one day you're going to take over. Yes, I'll get them involved in the business. I talk to my kids about the business. I talk to them about the day-to-day. And if my kids have questions in regards to anything, whether it's finance, marketing, logistics, buying and selling, all those wonderful things, I talk to them about it. And they are preview to what's going on in the business, but not with the goal of setting them up to be the next heir of the throne, so to speak. And I think that's just the right approach. You don't want to set certain expectations for your kids, because the worst thing that a child can have is an expectation set forth in front of him in which he's not confident. You know, they go through these age periods, especially during puberty or especially during becoming a teenager, where they're pretty sensitive. There's a lot of pressures on them from school, from personal life, from dating and peer pressure, that there's enough pressure on them already. So I don't want to be the guy to set additional pressure onto my kids by, you know, setting them up to be, you know, the next CEO of LuxuryBazaar.com. So I hope that answers your question. Guys, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed today. I hope you.
Uh-oh.
Hello?
Hey,
We have a problem with the Q&A Tuesday that you recorded.
What's the problem?
well,
It's a little short. It's a little under 10 minutes because you sort of repeated.
some questions.
Hold on a second. I'll be right there.
Okay. Come in.
What did I do?
So you repeated some questions in the last Q&A, and so we're kind of only.
You always stop me in the most awkward position on the screen. Like, that is just so bad. So what do I got to do?
Unless you want to do a short Q&A, I think we're gonna.
How about I just answer 2 more questions and we'll add them in?
Sounds
Or
fair to
3
me.
questions.
Yeah.
See ya.
Good luck.
Okay, so I guess I'll have to answer a couple more questions to finish off this episode. Sorry about that, guys. Next question. or additional question, I should say, comes from Peter Smith. Okay, Roman, I will give it a go. What do you think the next hot watches are going to be? I know you have a crystal ball, but this is just your personal prediction. So I'm not going to go grab my crystal ball on this one. I'm just going to generalize this thing. Look, we all know that Rolex is due for a new Submariner, right? It's been a while since the last one came out, so that's probably going to, when it comes to Rolex, if they do release a new Submariner this year, that's going to be it. I'm also probably foreseeing some sort of a new version of the Rainbow Daytona that's done so extremely well. Other than that, that's probably going to be it from Rolex. AP is going to continue what AP is doing. I'm wondering if they are going to release any other new Royal Oaks. But for the most part, I think they're going to do sort of the same thing over and over, probably come out with a few newer versions of the Royal Oak and some sort of a combination of stuff that has already been done, like a skeleton or frosted or a rainbow or things of that nature. But all in all, your question was on the hot watches. So that's it. Rolex, AP, and of course Richard Mille. Richard Mille is going to continue making the 1103s because they're still selling like hotcakes. I'm pretty sure there'll be some newer and other variations of the Bubba Watson, which has been extremely popular. All in all, I would like to see, or predict to see, I guess, is some sort of new use of materials. TPT from NTPT, North Applied Thin Technology. You guys remember I talked about that. That's something that's kind of already getting old. You know, they're doing various versions of existing watches in the TPT materials. They're sort of went back to their lineup and said, okay, now we're going to do everything we've had in TPT because it's so popular, right? So I'm hoping to see some sort of a new use of material. And I'm fairly certain, and they do this every single year, they're going to come out with something that's outrageous, something super complex in their higher end echelon in that $1 million plus range. Probably something new that's crystal. I've seen an aftermarket crystal Bubba Watson. Like somebody went out there, took a Bubba Watson, remade the case using crystal, and put it out there, and they're asking like $180,000 for the watch or something like that, right? I can see Richard Mille doing that. But for the most part, you're going to see innovation from them for sure in the form of a very complicated timepiece. And I'm hoping that we'll see some new materials. I would not be surprised that if Patek comes up with something new from their Nautilus lineup. And the reason for that is because the Nautilus lineup is just very small in comparison to, let's say, that of a Royal Oak lineup. And to be honest with you, Nautilus and Aquanauts is the only things that really sell from Patek Philippe. So in order to continue making margins, I can see them discontinuing a particular Nautilus and maybe coming out with a new one, hopefully a bigger one, you know, in the likes of the anniversary piece that they made, right? This would be a great time for them to discontinue all the Nautiluses that they have, the 5711, the 5980, the 5712, all those things this would be a great time to exit because those prices are through the roof and they're slowly starting to come down right now. If I was Patek, I'd be like, you know what, let's discontinue all that and come up with a completely new lineup of Nautiluses, completely new line of Aquanauts even, because sort of like finish at the top because I see them slowly dwindling down a little bit. So these are kind of my predictions. I told you guys before, I hate doing predictions, you know, because most of them never come true. Predictions on the internet are usually guys that are trying to come off as if they know everything and anything about, but nobody really knows what's going to happen in the future. I don't sit in the boardrooms of these big companies. I don't make those decisions. I wish I did, because I could certainly have a lot of great input for a lot of these companies. But nevertheless, this is sort of kind of like a prediction. Let's not call it predictions, because I really do hate making predictions. Peter, hope that shines a little bit of light on what I think about the future. This is a great question from Pooh C. Hunter. Hello, Roman. Love your videos. Thank you. As always, thank you for taking the time out to answer fan questions. I have a good relationship with my local AP dealership and build up quite the spending power. However, I'm often told that the rare watches such as white, black, skeleton, ceramic, perpetual that came out this year are only given to customers who are collectors who are not looking to resell and have a high spending. I feel cheated because I see people who have less spending than I do purchase those pieces mentioned above and reselling at unreasonable premium. Here's my question. Am I wasting my time building up my AP spending where I should just purchase these pieces from outside dealers? Okay, so yes and no, and I'll explain why. You mentioned that you're buying this at an AP dealership, right? An authorized AP dealer, not Audemars Piguet boutique. This is where you kind of went wrong to begin with, and I'll explain to you why. So let's say you have ADXYZ in your town to whom you come and you religiously buy watches from him and you're building up this relationship and so on and so forth. And then I come in and I don't even know your dealer. And that dealer happens to get in a watch that trades over list, right? Let's say the ceramic perpetual, not even the skeleton, right? The skeleton ceramic perpetual, Ian, if you throw that up on the screen, which is the predecessor of the regular ceramic, right? Right now, the market price on it is $200,000, and the retail price is around 150 or 160, I think, right? So it's trading at 40 grand over list. I walk into your AD tomorrow, and you've been waiting on that watch for about a year. He finally gets one in. And this is where loyalty is really tested by these authorized dealers. And right now, most ADs, most authorized dealers, regardless of what brands they carry, they're kind of hurting right now because their sales are hurt by, on the one end, us, the gray market dealers, and the internet. On the other hand, the manufacturer themselves. They're sort of screwing them right now. They're in a tight squeeze right now between the gray market and the companies themselves that are trying to go the boutique route, especially when you're talking about the hot brands, such as Audemars Piguet or Richard Mille for that matter, right? So right now he's got to try to squeeze every single dollar, because let me tell you something, overheads for these type of stores are quite high. Most of them are usually located in a prominent area, so where either the real estate itself is expensive or the rental of that real estate is really, really expensive. Qualified staff to have in the store and to turn on the lights every single day costs them a lot of money. So they got to make their margins. And when you're hurting, you do whatever you can in order to uplift your margins. So I walk into your AD, you're the guy waiting on that skeleton perpetual, and you're ready to pay that $160,000 for it. 6 months go by, the guy finally gets the watch in. The authorized dealer goes online, says, wait a minute, these things are listed for 220, 250, 260. Let me see, maybe I can get some more money out of this to help me, turn on the lights for the next few months. Lo and behold, he gets a hold of me, and I tell him, well, you know what, the market is 200. I'm gonna give you 190,000 for the watch, because I have a customer ready to pay 200 or 210 or 220, right? What do you think he's gonna do? As loyal as he may be to you, as much relationship you may have built up with him, you're still gonna get sold out. And sold out may be a harsh term, but in reality, all he's doing is he's squeezing the last dollar out of that particular piece. Because alongside with that ceramic perpetual, he also got maybe 3 or 4 code 1159s, which are not flying off the shelves, which he's probably gonna end up discounting in order to get rid of them, right? So this is where the difference comes in, and this is why I feel like you would be wasting your time, specifically with an AD. Now let's flip this over to a boutique. If you were a customer purchasing from an AP boutique, all those things are recorded. There's nobody in the AP boutique that's flipping these watches for more than its retail. Yes, I'm sure there's some sort of a preferences for the salespeople or the managers of the boutique that to certain customers that are, say, buying really, really high-end pieces. For somebody that walked into a boutique and bought a couple of grand comps, they're obviously going to get preferences over a guy that may have bought a Royal Oak, a code 1159, and a ladies Royal Oak or something of that nature. So I'm going to tell you, you are wasting your time at a local AD, but you would be wasting your time if you went to the AP boutique and gotten in line and said, look, this is the pieces I'm looking for. And the best part about it is that by walking into the AP boutique right now, the history of you purchasing those watches from the AD should still be there. So they can actually pull up and say, look, this is what I bought from my AD, right? And these are the pieces. Why don't you look them up? Make sure you see those purchases in your system. I now would like to buy this watch or get in line to buy this watch. And that should still work. So you kind of didn't waste your time by buying AP pieces as long as it's officially recorded that you bought them with AP. And you can sort of continue that relationship going. But if you're looking to get those hot pieces, the only way to do this would be, I shouldn't say the only way, but the most likely scenario of you actually getting them would be more likely through the AP boutique than it would be through your AD. Hope that answers your question. Next question from EJ Trinidad. I've answered his questions before. It's a guy who's been around since I probably started this YouTube channel. He says, great video again, thank you. Thanks for all the content, Roman. A few questions. If a recession hits tomorrow, what percentage drop would you think the hot pieces would have, i.e. 5711, 15202, Richard Mille's, Daytona, GMT? And the second question is, when you were starting out, how easy, hard was it for you to negotiate with veterans in the market of trying to get them to sell you pieces at lower prices? Well, first question, as I always say, even though I did do some predictions 2 questions ago, I don't have a glass ball. I can tell you what happened in 2008 when I was around. All the Nautiluses took a 50% dump, literally half. 5980s was 60,000, went down to 30,000. 5711s were trading at $20,000. They were at 40-some thousand dollars, right? Rolexes took probably about a 20 or 30% hit that back then but that was in '08. We almost had signs of depression at the time. But this was a financial crisis, and a global financial crisis at that. So this is not a good example to use, because a regular recession versus what happened in '08 probably be night and day in comparison. But this is what I saw back in '08. And in reality, it all depends on you guys, the general public, the guys that buy these watches. It's, the worst part that happened in '08, I told you before, was the mood stopped. Those that are buying expensive things are people that have a significant net worth, and that significant net worth was affected by this stock market, by whatever other real estate holdings they may have had, or any other places their money may have been parked. Not a whole lot of guys in '08 were sitting on cash, right? So, or not a whole lot of guys predicted '08 coming and they just moved all their assets into cash, right? Those that did made a smart move, because the opportunities post '08 were pretty much across anywhere, whether it's real estate, stock market, or expensive watches, jewelry, etc. Everything dropped in price, right? Diamonds, everything. So it really depends on you. Depending how bad the recession affects this tiny little percentage of consumers out there spending money on expensive goods such as watches, depending how they are affected. If they're not affected, if majority of them were smart enough to pull their assets that didn't take a big hit, the mood won't change. Yes, it will change somewhat. Well, there's a recession going on, maybe I should be a little bit more careful. But for the most part, it's going to depend on you, the consumer, how bad you were affected, your business, or whatever it is that you do for a living to make your living, to afford these watches. This is what is going to dictate the watch market. But you will see a decrease no matter what, because even if you're someone that moved all your assets into cash and you're doing fine and the recession is not affecting you, you're still going to think to the future and not going to be in an overall general mood to spend significant amounts of money on expensive toys. You're just going to sort of hold back, see what happens, and then slowly but surely reintroduce yourself into the market as a buyer for an expensive item. Hope that someone sheds that light into that question. And as far as when I was starting out, how easy was it to negotiate with veterans in the market? I told you guys before, in my business, you have to wear bulletproof underwear, because the guys that are in my business are sharks, and it doesn't matter whether you're seasoned or not seasoned, especially when you're not seasoned, they try to take advantage of you, right? But even if you are seasoned, still this day, 17 years later, almost 18 years later, I still have to stay sharp and on my toes, because guys out there, if they see an opportunity, they'll take advantage of it. And when I say take advantage of it, I don't mean like screw you, but I mean charge you more. You really have to, it all depends on the knowledge. And it also stems back to how good of a salesperson you are, right? Because buying and selling kind of go hand in hand. I consider myself a good salesperson. So when I was out there buying, I was in turn able to sell even some of the seasoned veterans to sell me things at a lower margins, unlike, let's say, the next guy who wasn't as well versed or as well spoken or as good of a salesman, because buying and selling is the same exact thing. It's all about how good of a salesperson you are. And then the last I can say about that is that it's also situational. You have to be able to feel out the situation. How desperate is this dealer to get off this inventory? You know what I mean? You have to know the market at the time. And one of the things I did from the very, very get-go is I talked to a lot of people. I tell you these guys all the time. Guys that ask me, how do I get into this business? Information. So my whole thing was I got squeezed as much information as possible by attending trade shows, by talking to dealers on the phone, in person, visiting various ADs and things of that nature to sort of get the feel of the market. So when I'm out there buying, I know what's more desirable, what's less desirable, what's more sellable in the store versus what's less sellable in the store. And depending on that, I can make offers accordingly. I was also very well versed in staying in these dealers' space, knowing what inventory they have, so that 6 months later, if I'm in that same store or if I'm talking to the same wholesaler, and I know he's had that watch for 6 months, I know I can go a bit lower. I know I can squeeze him a little bit more. But at the same time, I was also not obnoxious, right? Because I knew, for the most part, I knew what the costs were to the dealer on some of the pieces. For the most part, I knew what the market was. So I didn't go in and lowball everybody to try to get the lowest price. This is a technique that actually doesn't work. Unless you're walking in with a humongous wallet and literally saying, I'm spending $1 million, this is what I want. And of course, when I was starting out, I barely had that. At the most, I would purchase 2 to 3 watches at a time when I walked in somewhere, sometimes even 1. Or most of the time, really, when I started, it was on call. So the guys that I was talking to, they already knew I had it sold, which doesn't give you a whole lot of bargaining power when you're calling a couple of dealers saying, hey, can I get a couple of more points? And the guy says no, because he already knows I have the watch sold and I have to deliver it. Hope that shines a little bit of more light into that question. Well, guys, this is it. I answered a few more questions to finish off that episode. I don't know what happened, how I got confused within my documents with the same exact questions. I'd be curious to go back and see how I answered each question that I duplicated. Hopefully more or less the same, but again, I answered these off the top of my head, so most likely it'll be different. I'll go back to Ian's office and check that out. Meanwhile, as always, like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things that help my channel grow, and I'll see you guys next Tuesday.